So what does this mean moving forward? Now, if we look at Mr. Iger, I think it's very easy to forget that Mr. Iger was replaced by Bob Chapek, and Bob Chapek, to this, the industry still quite hasn't figured out how he did that. Right? He wasn't a Hollywood player. He wasn't anyone whose name was on anyone's lips, and yet he came up and replaced Bob Iger for at least several years. Even though Mr. Iger came back in, tried to overshadow him, and has now come back in and removed him. So the enigma of Bob Chapek is that somebody put him in power. So clearly, we had people that were dissatisfied with Mr. Iger for some time with his management, and I think for all the reasons that I'm sure we've talked about here, and I know our friend WDW Pro was saying on yesterday's live stream on Midnight's Edge about how all of the issues that they're blaming on Chapek as the reason for removing him are issues that Mr. Iger set in place, particularly the streaming methods and all of that. And so he's coming back in to continue the job he did, which wasn't a great job in the first place. And clearly he had enemies within the system internally at Disney, and clearly at least among some of the bigger investors. We obviously Mr. Iger has support from what we would call the woke capitalists, the BlackRocks of the world, who believe that their destiny is to use other people's money to change the world according to their philosophy. But there are others like Rupert Murdoch, who is one of the largest shareholders of Disney. He might be the largest or the second largest. But so you have somebody like Rupert Murdoch, who clearly has been an ally of Bob Chapek and has used the Wall Street Journal to be a pro-Chapek paper for quite some time. And so it's not shocking to think maybe Mr. Murdoch and others of his ilk who just want to make money and not necessarily, Mr. Murdoch has certainly had an effect on world culture, but it seems to have always come from a place of I just want to make money, and rather than I'm actually trying to change the world according to my philosophy. And so those people are still around. Those people who put Bob Chapek in power are still there. Their guy may be gone, but they're still there. And Susan Arnold, who I've often likened to Emperor Palpatine, is still there. So one thing, and I actually got a comment from a colleague of mine, the same person who had reached out to somebody at Lucasfilm who confirmed that, yes, the Indiana Jones 5 screenings had happened, and yes, they had gone poorly. And according to this person who was witness to it, that Bob Chapek had some very harsh words with Kathleen Kennedy about those results. And so the same person then reached out to me this morning and said, and again, I cannot confirm this. I didn't have this conversation. It's from a source that I trust because he's been right in the past. Has said that based on his context in Disney, it appears that this is something that Susan Arnold allowed to happen because she realized the chips were stacked against her apprentice. She had been at least the instrument to put Bob Chapek there and had been his supporter and protector, but the chips had been stacked against him. And so she decided, all right, we're going to do a little bit of a Count Dooku on him. It's a necessary loss, right? we have to sacrifice him for a greater play. So what is the greater play moving forward? From what my contact tells me, and it makes sense to me intuitively, is that Ms. Arnold, who represents the sort of Rupert Murdoch rich guy, faction, they're like, all right, so we're going to give these guys a win. We're going to give these woke capitalists a win to let them burn out because this is exactly the wrong moment for their win because as we talked about yesterday, culture is changing against them. Twitter has been freed up from at least the woke monopoly, right? And, Elon Musk has, and that's caused a lot of panic. We've had the collapse of FTX, which was supported by a lot of these woke capital firms, right? This is the wrong moment for this victory. It's exactly the kind of thing they would do because they're panicking. But so, all right, culture is against them. The tide has already turned. And so let these guys put Iger back in power, let him continue because he doesn't know any other playbook except to do what he does, which is, Mr. Iger's playbook was, I'm going to throw money at my friends and, go to parties and look cool, right? And not think any of this out long-term, right? That he hasn't changed as a person or as a manager. That's who he is. So he's going to continue down this path. He doesn't have an understanding of streaming. He doesn't have an understanding of content, or at least where the audience is with regard to the content. Chapek understood that and was trying to get the Disney machine onto content that the audience wanted. That was what he said in his memo. We're going to remove people that are no longer giving the audience what they want, which was, of course, the moment where you say to the CIA, we're going to break you up, and the CIA responds, right? And so what I think is about to happen, there's a short term and there's a long term. So the long term is, I think Ms. Arnold and her backers, who were the Chapek backers, will let this play out. Will let the woke capitalists and Mr. Iger make things worse. just say, okay, you can't blame Chapek anymore. This is your baby. Let's see you do it. And he won't be able to do it because he's the one that created all these problems in the first place. He doesn't know how to fix the problems he created because I don't think he understands that they were problems, right? And so he's going to continue down this path. And while their stock price had a brief sort of dead cat jump today because like, oh, there's going to be change that we know, which is Iger, within a not too long future, that stock price is going to go back down when they start seeing that the policies aren't improving because the man who put the policies in place is back. And the man they blame for those policies is gone, was trying to fix it. Okay.
But, so those are Iger's return is part of unintended consequences. Mm-hmm. I don't think I don't think they want to ride this disillusion of wokeness. Mm-hmm. I think they're in the middle of it. They worship it. I don't think they see it.
No, they don't. So they're thinking this is a temporary loss, that we lost Twitter. It's a temporary loss that our FTX friends got busted. To their mindset, because they see themselves, and I've had these conversations with people who at least share the philosophy, and which is most of the people I think, Paul, you would agree with in this town, are rather progressive in their outlook. They're sort of Marxian without thinking about it. And I've had these conversations, and they absolutely believe that history is on their side. It's like Marx. History is God. And so this is a brief moment. It's like what apparently President Obama said when Mr. Trump was elected. He said to his staff, history doesn't go in a straight line. It goes zigs and zags. But in his mind, it's heading in a direction, right? And so all these woke capitalists think, okay, this Iger, this Chapek fool briefly disrupted our visionary plan for humanity. Well, we're back on track right now. And Elon Musk is going to temporarily disrupt it, but we're going to be on track. I agree with you, Paul, that they do not see it as a dissolution, but I think the historical process will lead to a dissolution in the same way that the Red Guards during the Maoist Cultural Revolution, they believed that was historical progress that would never stop.
So, but one of the big changes I've seen is back in the 90s, all actors were part of what I would call light socialism.
Yes.
Now you have to toe the line.
Correct.
That is the major change. If you aren't towing the line, then you're letting down the side. There was no side in the 1990s when I was there. It was just light socialism.
Correct. So now it's Maoism, which is very different.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Yeah, and Maoism is a threat to traditional liberalism as well as traditional conservatism. It's a whole radical threat, right, to the whole system. So my view is long term, they're going to let this play out to the point where they're going to ruin themselves because the historical process is now against them, as we're seeing publicly. Culture is against them, politics is turning against them, and economics is turning against them. But they don't see it.
Casino is against them.
Culture. So now let me say my thought on the short term. And forgive me, I'm just putting a fire hose of stuff because I would have had more of a conversation had I talked to you for an hour rather than running in at the last minute. So here's my short term thing. It's a message I sent to Andre last night. This is what I believe is the short-term thing. And this, Andre, is a prediction. I'm going to give my seer hat, and we'll see if I'm right or wrong. But this is my seer prediction for the short term of how the supporters of Bob Chapek, because they're still there, and they are unhappy that he's been removed. I know that because I've mentioned that I have contacts, Disney employees who are members of my Patreon. They emailed me this morning saying that they're shocked and upset, and that's a widespread sentiment, at least amongst normal people at Disney, and that that not to their surprise, the Maoists are cheering, right? But they are seen as a loud and dangerous minority that's messing everyone's livelihood up, right? So the supporters of Bob Chapek, what are they going to do now that their guy has been removed in the short term? And I believe in the short term, we're going to see some of the same strategy that was done in the past when they needed to remove Iger the first time, who was overshadowing Chapek and wouldn't go, which was what I predicted here on Midnight's Edge, is that if Chapek really is trying to take control, he's going to use the media. So Chapek is not there, but his people, his friends and allies, including Ms. Arnold, are still there. So I believe in the short term, they're going to begin the process of creating real difficulties for Bob Iger and his supporters. And how are they going to do that? They're going to do it like they've done in the past. They're going to leak things to friendly media. Now it's going to be leaking out things that are going to embarrass Bob Iger. They're going to embarrass some of the wokesters inside of the company because now they've got nothing to lose. They've lost their guy. All they can do is undermine him, right? And accelerate his downfall, which is Susan Arnold's longer term plan. So I believe in the near future, you're going to see articles in the periodicals that have proven to be pro Chapek in the past, which includes Forbes, it includes Wall Street Journal, it includes the Hollywood Reporter, and to some degree, it also includes Puck, which is a new blog that's come out there, Matthew Baloney, that has had some sophisticated analysis of this situation and understands there's deeper politics here. So I believe you're going to see in the near future leaked information that's going to embarrass Bob Iger. It may embarrass Kathleen Kennedy. It may embarrass anybody on that team that is currently cheering that they've had the long sought victory against the forces of fascism in their mind, right? And then again, because I've said it, the timing is very specific. There's multiple events. There's the Indiana Jones screenings that our friend Doomcock put out there, which embarrassed Disney. There is then follow up with that, with suddenly Elon Musk actually pulling the trigger on the things that they were afraid he was going to do, which is actually push out the woke employees, put President Trump back on, whether one likes that or not. That's certainly not a victory for the wokesters, and was definitely something that terrified them to see that they could not control who was on that platform, and the people that they despise the most are being reasserted into that platform, meaning they've completely lost the narrative there. And then the third event that happened in this firestorm of events in the last 10 days is this FTX collapse. And if anyone looks deeper into FTX, which we will see more and more of, the New York Times isn't going to look deeper because it's their friends involved in it. The Washington Post won't look any deeper because it's their friends involved in FTX. But now we're having citizen journalists breaking all the information that shows that people at the Securities Exchange Commission. I worked at the Securities Exchange Commission when I was a law student. I spent a summer there, so I got to see its internal workings. Right. So the SEC essentially covered up things FTX was doing. Politicians were taking their money, and woke capitalists were funding this. So this is the same cast of characters that ruled Bob Chapek. And so the loss of FTX in that kind of public humiliation and embarrassment was a complete crisis for these people. And I believe because so many people, particularly in Hollywood, will have had their fingers associated with FTX. We've seen the public side of it. We've seen Gisele Bündchen, right? We've seen celebrities. You see Larry David being embarrassed and it's being written about the trades because they publicly touted FTX. That, again, actors, and I think Paul will agree with me in Script Doctor, that actors are simply the front of the system. So the reason that Gisele and all these celebrities were touting FTX is they were told to do so by rich people in Hollywood behind the scenes who were involved in it. Those rich people will be part of the anti-Chapek movement. Now, if I were them, if I were the pro-Chapek people, I would start leaking out those connections to this incredibly corrupt organization, this FTX organization. All of that is going to start coming out literally in the days to come. I don't think it's going to be weeks. I think this is going to trigger whatever dead man switch Chapek had in place of releasing information. And I think we're going to have a very lively next few days and next few weeks as this brief moment of victory becomes more and more embarrassing for Iger and his team as their secrets start coming out, because they've put Chapek's allies in a position of they have nothing more to lose, literally. Now they might as well burn it down. That is what I think is coming in the near term.